All right, good evening. That makes 9:30, so let's get started. Today, welcome to my inaugural stream here for students of History 126, the United States since 1877, and we are going to be playing Twilight Struggle. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is John Riley. I am a history professor at Lycoming College in Williamsport, PA, and just let me know how the sound is doing for everyone. It's good for me, but I'm not sure how I sound for you. And for those of you who do know me, some of my students, if I sound a little off, I have had a head cold for the past couple of days, and everything is just really different in here. So I apologize if I sound a little different. But if the mic is not loud enough, or if the background music is too loud, just please let me know. All right. So today we are getting into this phenomenal port of a board game that came out in 2005, Twilight Struggle, and it was right here. It was co-designed by Ananda Gupta and Jason Matthews, and it really made a splash when it came out. Started winning awards right away. It was the first game... Japple216, thanks for the follow. Appreciate you being here. It was one of the first game. It was the first game to win 2 awards in the same year at the International Gamers Awards. It won for Best 2-Player Game and Best Historical Simulation. And I particularly like it because it is a really great way to get at some of the topics that we deal with in this class, and really boils them down to sort of an abstract form. And additionally, for any of you who are new to Twilight Struggle, this will show you a little bit about what to do and how to play. So for any of my students, you should have received your Steam keys already. Make sure you redeem those at some point, because I do want to hear from you as you play and how it's going, how the things you're doing in game and the choices you make differ or reflect for the things we're reading about in class. I did notice, by the way, that I had uploaded the wrong PowerPoint for today. I gave you the one from Ike's presidency in the 50s, so I did fix that. The correct one is now up. So you got both of them. There you go. All right. So when you're getting ready to go in, all you have to do is go ahead here and click normally play online if you're going to play against one of your classmates, but today I'm just going to do a simple offline game to get you started. When it's time for you to play online, all you really have to do is go in here, click create your account. It's very straightforward. They'll send you a thing, and then you can go ahead and get yourself, put in your email address, create a password. They'll get you recognized, and then that way post it on Moodle so your classmates can find each other and you can get going. All right, so I'm going to go ahead here, click play offline. There is a nice tutorial for you. However, it is I'm not going to do that today. You can do that on your own, but it is really well done. So today we're just going to dive right in. And so this is what the game looks like when you first create it and open it up. I've got we're going to do the standard game here. I'll play as the Americans because of freedom, I guess, and we will let the AI player handle the Soviet. All right. You can also have it just do it randomly. That's always an option that you can do. But for today, to get us started, I'm going to choose sides. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right. So Twilight Struggle, a phenomenal game, and the port for PC is really quite nice. The lovely people at Playdeck are responsible, and at Asmodee Digital are responsible for converting this and getting it out to everyone. And I actually believe, I looked earlier today, I'm pretty sure they're having a sale right now on Steam. So for any of you who do not have this and are interested, it's under $4 right now through April 10th, so it's really worth your time and worth a look. All right, so what do we have here? This is the game map. It breaks down the world into the United States, the Soviet Union, and then everywhere else. And your countries are all represented by these blocks here. And each one has some pretty relevant information. You have the little country flag, which is quite nice. The name of the country. Now, if it is in this sort of blue and white standard country, if it is in red, that is what's called a battleground. And battleground countries are quite important because historically they're places where things happen that are of note. So East and West Germany, of course, the FRG and the GDR, France and Italy. If you take a look over at Asia, North and South Korea, obvious battlegrounds. Pretty much everywhere in the Middle East is a battleground. And so in that ways, the game becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Places that mattered historically to the Cold War are important here. And they become important because the game is played by scoring points for each region. And each region is basically measured by how much presence you have. Now, presence is determined by how many countries you control. In order to get ahead of a person, you need to have more battlegrounds than they do. Right? So both sides will score if they have presence. Presence is having at least one country. In order to dominate a region, you need to have more countries than your opponent, more battlegrounds than your opponent, and at least one of those countries has to be a non-battleground. And what's really nice is the game tracks all of that for you. So very quickly at a glance, we can see that right now, if Europe was to score, our mutual presence would offset, but the Soviets would pick up a couple points because they have battlegrounds and I don't. If we go over to Asia, we would see that right now, presence, and but again, the Soviets have a battleground and I don't. And in the Middle East, neither of us has anything. So there's influence points, but no presence. I already played one game and I lost. Oh well, that's okay. That is okay. And welcome to chat. So, also, I do apologize. This cold has killed me. I'm going to try to be good with the mute today, in case I need to step away and either blow my nose or if I get sniffling. Only because it's terrible and no one should have to endure that. All right. So we're talking about regions, and you score by having influence points in these regions. Now, how we get those points is through card plays. This is a card-driven game, so what that means is everything we do is based on a deck of cards. And there are all sorts of things. Some of them refer to very specific events from Cold War history, such as the US-Japanese Mutual Defense Pact, whereas others refer to more abstract long-term processes like Eastern European unrest or decolonization. Right? This is happening globally, whereas this is sort of a one-time thing that goes off. Now, these cards are either Soviet events, US events, and that's denoted by the color of the star, or both. And I actually don't have a both in my hand at the moment. That's a pity. So on my turn, what I will do is I choose one of these cards to play. Now, if it's my own event, I can play it for that event or play it for the points value. And there's all sorts of things you can do with those points. I'll walk you through what those options are. If it's your opponent's event, you can only use the card for its ops value, that is, the number inside the star. But the event will still go off, and so you have to try and balance when your opponent's events go off and what they will likely do. So, we'll get into all of that. The game begins with the world pretty much as it existed at the end of World War I. The United States and the Soviets have a little bit of influence around the globe, but for the most part, the countries are unaligned as the great empires of France, Britain, Belgium, the Netherlands, as they're collapsing. Lots of places are going to be looking to flex their international and political muscle and begin to chart their own course, in some for the first time in centuries. And we can't not meddle at that, so here we go. So we have a pretty standard opening play for the Soviet Union. They've beefed up Eastern Germany and Poland. Now the number on the country indicates the stability rating. It is the political, it's the amount of influence points that you have to invest in order to have the country under your control. And in this case, as you can see, they've overcharged each of these. So even if I managed to take a point away from Poland or Germany, it would still remain fully Soviet. I apologize, excuse me. I get 7 to place on my own. Pretty standard opening move for Germany. For the Americans, is to place 4 into West Germany and then overcharge Italy to guard against a possible Soviet coup there. Alright, so I'm going to commit my decision, and here we go. Turn 1. Once a game that would likely lead to my utter demise in a head-to-head match, good sir. Well, it depends who you play against, I suppose. I have, for a while, we haven't done it lately, but for a long time I had an ongoing set of games with another professor at Princeton, good Dr. Fagel, and I mean, not to boast, but I think I went on a 13-game winning streak, 13 or 14? I lost count. But, Princeton, Lycoming. Okay, there you go. Alright. Oh gosh, the computer's already chosen their headline card. I'm lagging behind. So each turn begins with what we call a headline phase, and that is where each of us is going to play an event simultaneously that is going to set the tone for the rest of the turn. And so this is the thing that's going to grab press attention, and this is where you really want to play events that are going to have positive long-term benefits for your side. So, for example, I have a couple of those. Containment, which you actually read about in today's readings and in your PowerPoint. All further operations cards played by the U.S. this turn are going to add 1 to their value. That's a pretty solid card. I want to get that out right away. But I'm also currently tempted by Defectors, which is a card that will cancel the Soviet Union's card. And right now, I'm unsure which one I want to go with. Because, yes, I want something good for myself, but the ability to get rid of something good for the Soviets is always a good option. You know what? No. I'm going to think positively. I'm going to give myself the boost. Most of my cards are less than 4 in strength, which means it's not going to be wasted. So we're going to headline Containment, and now we'll see what the Soviet player does. Captured Nazi scientists. All right. So the space race is very much a part of this game, as it was historically, and it's controlled by a little sideboard that is off quite literally to the side. It's up there next to the score, and the first person to advance to certain boxes, so you have them here, Earth, Satellite, Animal in Space, the first man in space. Whoever gets to some of these gets victory points, as you can see, but there's also abilities that can come up here as well, and some of those are quite powerful as the game progresses. So art imitates life, and the Soviets have been the first one to have an Earth satellite. Sputnik is up there. Nothing I can do about that. Just have to move on. Alright. The Soviet player always gets to begin, which means the US player almost always gets to end the turn, which that's really nice to have the ability to react and know that the Soviet player can't do anything about it as the turn ends. And again, we're now doing history out of order. Oh, he didn't do it for the event. He placed influence. So the Soviet player played a card, the Warsaw Pact. Because it was a Soviet event, he could use it for his points or the event, and he chose to use it for the points. What he did, he put 2 points into Afghanistan, and he put a point into Lebanon. Why is he doing that? Well, he now has more countries than me in Asia. He has at least 1 non-battleground in Asia, and he has more battlegrounds than I do. If Asia was to come up right now, he would score 5 points for that. So this is a zero-sum game. See, I would be getting 3 and him 8. It offsets. He just gets 5 total. So I need to think about ways to counter that. He has also gained presence in the Middle East, so got to keep my eye there. Like most good games, there is too much to do and not enough time to do it in. So here we go. Let us see. I think I actually want to open not with this for the event, but rather for its points, and I'll let the event shuffle back in. Hopefully the Soviets will get it. Let us shore up Korea. Iran's a nice choice here. Now I also want to begin, I really want to get Canada up there for NORAD, so for now I've neutralized the threat of Asia or the Middle East scoring, and we go ahead. And that's how you place influence. You literally just use the card's value to put points on the board and go from there. Let's see what happens. AI is deciding. Charles de Gaulle leads France. He's using it for his points. Oh, he's leapfrogged from Afghanistan into Pakistan, once again gaining something he needs. Now I have a boost to my card, so I think I want to use Eastern European Unrest. Not for its event, mind you, which is quite nice, but because it can keep happening. Eastern Europe was notoriously feisty for the Soviets. But I'd rather attempt a coup. So you have lots of options, and you get those prompted when you pick up. I could play it for the event. I can place influence, which you saw me do. You can attempt a realignment roll. Now, a realignment roll is basically everything short of an actual armed invasion to attempt a regime change. So it's a media blitz, it's propaganda, it's even possibly election tampering. And it can backfire on you. It can potentially take influence away from you. But if you have enough adjacent countries, you can get some really nice bonuses and neutralize an opponent's alignment. But the one I'm going to go for is the most aggressive, and that's called a coup. So when you have coup attempts, you are taking the value of the card against the stability rating of a country and then rolling a die. And what you're hoping to do is not only reduce your opponent's influence, but possibly replace it with some of your own. And I think I want to coup Pakistan. So here comes the, are you sure you want to commit to this screen? So here we go. It's worth 4, thanks to the boost from containment. The Pakistan's coup defense is also a 4, because you always double the stability rating. That means countries like West Germany, with its 4, would become an 8. Very difficult to coup there. But Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America are scattered with countries who have 1s and 2s for stability ratings. Prime targets for coupping. And it gives you a preview, right? So if I roll a 1, I still reduce Pakistan's control down from 2 to 1. The Soviets no longer have it. But if I roll well, I could potentially put in place a very stable US-backed regime. In fact, I have a 50% chance of getting full control right now. So let's see what happens. Let us, as they say, roll those dice. And it's so good! Oh! A US-backed coup in Pakistan has kicked out the socialist government and put in place a firmly US one. So a couple things are going to happen now that I have couped. First, the DEF CON is going down. So this is another sideboard that you have to keep track of. The Defense Con refers to something the United States has. DEF CON 5 is peace, DEF CON 1 is war. And whenever you coup in a battleground country, the defense condition degrades as the militaries on both sides step up their preparations for a potential armed conflict. What's nice about Twilight Struggle is the side that actually causes a thermonuclear war loses, because whatever survives of humanity will forever blame you for wiping out, all of humanity. So the point of the game is brinkmanship, in effect, right? Keyword for your final. You want to get right to nuclear war without triggering it, and exist in that space. Now, for a board game, that's fine. For people who lived through this, it was absolutely terrifying. So the defense condition has degraded. What this actually means in game terms is that now there can be no more coups or realignment rolls in Europe. The militaries of both sides are on heightened alert in Europe. You just can't coup there anymore. Once it drops to 3, Asia's off the table. Once it drops to 2, you can't coup or realign in the Middle East. Africa, Central and South America are still up for grabs, but another coup in a battleground, game over. Additionally, what I did, there's a little sideboard here. There we go. So at the same time that you have to keep track of the defense condition, you also have required military operations. Chapel 216 Warmonger. Well, I do what I gotta do. Your people expect a certain amount of saber rattling. So when times are peaceful, they expect you to be out there sort of thumping the chest and showing off your prowess to the world. But as you edge closer and closer to nuclear war, cooler heads start to prevail and people go, maybe we don't want to show off too bad. So right now, the DEFCON status is at 4, and I did 4 points worth of military operations. I'm fine. If the turn was to end right now, the Soviet player would actually lose 4 victory points, as the Soviet people are upset that their government is not out there demonstrating its strength. So, I mean, there's going to be no problem with them getting there. NATO. NATO is a phenomenal event, but it has prerequisites. It requires either the Marshall Plan or the Warsaw Pact to be in effect first, and neither of those cards has been played for their events, so I don't get NATO. That's too bad. By itself, NATO doesn't do a lot, but it is a prerequisite for some of the more interesting cards that come up later in the game. Alright, now I was busy lamenting my poor fate. I didn't even see what he did. He stuffed 1 into West Germany, which that cost him 2-1 because I had control there, and then he put 2 into Yugoslavia, so he technically has what he needs right now to score Europe. I'm going to answer back. I'm going to go ahead and use the Cambridge 5. This refers to a group of intellectuals who were passing secrets to the Soviet Union. Normally it lets the USSR peek at any scoring cards in my hand. I don't have any, so I don't really care. Although that is, in and of itself, important information. So here we go. We'll resolve the Soviet event first. Look at that. I had no cards to show. Now we're going to place influence. Let's get control of Germany back. Let's grab Canada. And because I get 1 more, I like Greece. We're going to use Greece as a leapfrog to get to Turkey. Plus, the Truman Doctrine was all about protecting Greece and Turkey. It just seems thematically appropriate. Alright, so let's commit. Now, how many turns you play depends on what stage of the game you are in. In the early war, you're going to play 6 of your cards. You're actually dealt 8. 1 is used for your headline phase, and then 1 is kept extra and carried over to the next turn. So, we've gone through 3 of our 6. The Soviets play the China card and use it to really push into Europe. So, one of the things that this game does abstract is the fact that the Cold War was not just a contest between the Soviet Union and the United States. It's global. And there's lots of other players who are involved, making decisions and choices that have nothing to do with what the United States or the Soviet Union wants. And one of those big powers is China. And that is represented by a very powerful card, the China card. It's worth 4 points. Any side can play it. If you use all of the points in Asia, it's actually worth 1 more than usual. And if you're the one who controls it at the end of the game, you get a bonus victory point. Because the Soviet Union played the China card, it passes to me, and what this represents is the fact that historically China was quite willing to play ball with almost anybody in exchange for international recognition and stability. So at the beginning, you have a Sino-Soviet alliance. After Mao Zedong defeats the Kuomintang and drives out Chiang Kai-shek, the communists in China seek out the Soviet Union, but they never really get along. It's a marriage of expedience, not one of actual affinity. And it falls apart very quickly. And later on, the United States starts to get wise to this and realize, aha! Like, just because a country is communist does not mean they're marching to Moscow's fiddle, and we can perhaps use them. And so this is how, if I use the China card, it'll bounce back, and vice versa. So for now, that's just in my hand. Let's see here. Blockade. Unless U.S. player immediately discards a 3 or more value ops card, eliminate all U.S. influence in West Germany. Now, normally I would do that and just ditch decolonization, which does now count as a 3 ops card thanks to containment, but I have to deal with this. This is just unacceptable to me. Having the FRG be this communist just makes my soul sad. So we're going to use some Eastern European unrest. 1, 2, 3, and you know what? I'm going to put a 4th one there. So I now have 9 to their 4. That is 1 more than the stability rating of the country. I have control, so if they want to put points back in, it's going to cost them double. The only reason I can think the AI is pushing at this so hard is because they're trying to score Europe before the turn is over. And by the way, I should point out, there should be a quiz for you all on the Twitch page take a look. Feel free to vote on who's going to win, me or the AI. It's honestly a coin flip. The AI can be quite good at times, or maybe I'm just that bad. We'll see. Here we go. Commit my turn. They got a couple card plays left. What are they thinking? Let's see. What are they thinking? The Suez Crisis for a coup. Where did it go? Ooh, it went to Iran. Iran is a very popular coup target for the Soviet Union because it has a low stability rating and early on is nominally under the control of the United States. Thanks to Operation Ajax during World War II, when Soviet and British and U.S. forces took control of a neutral Persia because they were afraid that the ruling Shah was just a little too friendly with fascists in Europe. So just to be safe, they took it over, naturally. And post-war, there had been a pro-Western-ish government. And that will largely change when the U.S. and British organize a coup against Mohammad Mossadegh, but that's down the road. What I can say for now, though, is the Suez Crisis, the Soviets bungled it. Yes, they did remove some of my influence, but not nearly enough. That's a battleground country, so the defense condition has deteriorated. No more coups in Asia or realignment roles in Asia. Now is a good time. Europe is back balanced. Now is a good time for me to use blockade. So this refers to the Berlin blockade. This basically Stalin throwing down the gauntlet. If the U.S. player does not discard a high-value card, then the West Germans lose all hope that the U.S. can do anything to save them. I will resolve this event by getting rid of decolonization, and that way I don't have to play decolonization later and risk it going off. Yay! And now I can place influence. We're gonna get Iran back, and I think so. I've actually got dominance in Asia. Let me leapfrog to Turkey. All right. So the Soviet Union, this is their last card play, I believe. Oh my gosh, they are not going to get their required military ops. So they played European scoring. If you don't play a scoring card, by the way, that you're supposed to, you just lose the game. So the Soviets had to do it. We both have presence. We both have the same number of battlegrounds, so it's a tie. That is great for the U.S., because as the U.S. player, you actually want to run out the clock. The Soviets want to try and win in the first 3 turns if they can, because this is an asymmetrical game. So the cards are not created equal, the starting situation is not created equal, and the balance comes from the longevity. If the Soviet player can marshal their cards correctly, if they can get off to a good start, they can build a real lead, possibly even win early. But as the game goes on, there's just no comparing the Soviet economy in the United States. And I don't mean that's not a denigration. It's simply the gross national product of each is just wildly different. And so as the game progresses and you get to new cards in the mid and late war, the US's cards become really, really good. And if the Soviet player has not built up a sufficient lead, they will be in real trouble. Alright, so for my last card play, I wish I could have kept defectors for next turn, but that's okay. I think what I would like to do, I should take advantage of the points while I have them. So no, because without surrounding support, all that's going to take is one good Arab-Israeli war card, and I'm going to lose that investment. No, I think my points are better spent in Asia. I want to start leapfrogging my way up towards Thailand. And let's grab some of this territory here, because Southeast Asia will score. It's not going to score yet, but by the mid-war, it's going to score. So let's get prepared. Alright, so current DEFCON level is 3. The Soviets did get there with their coup in Iran, so they're all set. Containment is over.
Regimes are nurtured by misery and want. They spread and grow in the evil soil of poverty and strife.
So the defense condition is now at 4.
When the hope of a people
and now it's turn 2. So let's take a look here. What we've got, some new cards. Nuclear test ban. It's a fun one. The creation of the CIA lets me peek at the Soviet player's hand and then take points, especially if you do it as a headline. It's out of order. Red Scare Purge. So this is a phenomenal card for either side. It's basically the opposite of containment. It degrades your opponent's cards and makes them less valuable. Now, the abdication of the Romanian monarch. This will give the Soviet Union a control of Romania. Arab-Israeli War. This card is a recurring card because there's like 6 of them historically. But it's one of the ways that the Soviet player can really grab victory points in the Middle East. And as the US, I want to try and support Israel with adjacent countries. The problem is that's kind of hard to do. You start behind in influence in the Middle East, and there are cards that are going to take US influence out, so I'm very hesitant to put some in until I know for sure where those are. And speak of the devil, here we have Nasser. He adds 2 Soviet influence in Egypt, and he takes away half of the US. So pretty much no US player who knows what they're doing will bother to invest in Egypt until Nasser has been dealt with. Ooh, the Olympic Games. This is a really fun one. Look, Olympics, huge part of international politics by design. I always sometimes hear people complain like, oh, why are we politicizing the Olympics? They were created to be political so that nations could draw attention to issues while competing at the height of human achievement, right? What better way to do that? And there have been so many fascinating developments that we will talk about in this class that have to do with sports, right? The opening of China due to an exhibition ping pong tournament. Jesse Owens winning 4 gold medals for the United States during the games held in Nazi Germany. Recently, the inclusion of a unified Korean team at the Winter Olympics. I mean, these things matter because, ideologies aside, when human beings are interacting, there's the real potential to do things, and that's why I love the Olympics. But so this is a fun one. Let's see here. Headline for me: I think I want to screw up the Soviets' plans. They're busy purging their best officers, and they're going to be distracted by that and lose points from their cards this turn. So let's see what they do. Oh, the Korean War. Oh boy. Oh my gosh, they won! Oh, the Soviets won the Korean War. That's what happens when you don't have support. Oh my gosh. Yep. So the UN resolution failed to materialize in time, or maybe the Soviets blocked it. Historically, this did not happen because an international army was sent, but seems like we didn't get there in time. North Korea has completed the conquest of the peninsula, and the 2 Koreas are made one again. Oh, boy, that's going to throw off the whole rest of this turn. Where's defectors now when I need it? Really kicking myself for that decision. Oh, they're cooing with Comic-Con. Targeting Iran. Ooh, and it's successful. Completely wiped me out of Iran. It's neutral. No one has it, but... Yeesh. And that lowers the defense condition. No more coups in Asia. So, boy, they really came out and said, hello, we are here. So let's take a look at what I'm going to do. I really should replace those points in Iran. And I gotta do something else to shore up Asia. Now that Asia is safe from coups, I'm going to push into Thailand. So let's place influence. Definitely going to snag that. And I think I want Iran back. I'm not done with the Shah. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. That was a tough 2 sets of cards for the Soviet. Who are you? Comrade Questions? We actually have 7 streamers concurrently. That's fun. Welcome all. Glad you're with us. Desalinization? Boy, they're using these for the influence, which means I'm going to have to deal with these events later. And they took control of Iraq. A socialist Iraq is now in the Middle East, and they're making a play on Saudi Arabia. I like none of this. This is terrible. You know what? Knowledge is power. I gotta know what's coming down the pipe here. I want to see. He has no scoring cards in his hand. Ooh, but he has some excellent U.S. events. He has some excellent U.S. events, and this one can degrade the defense conditions. So I think I want to do that myself and potentially force him to lose the game. If he's smart, he just won't play it. But you know, sometimes things happen. All right, and now I have 1 point. What if I try... So I could potentially try a realignment roll here. What I'm trying to do is basically convince the Iraqi people to give up on their current socialist government. And you add in modifiers from adjacent countries. So I have influence coming in from Iran, he has a government in Iraq, and it shows you the results. It's not great. There's an almost 60% chance that this does nothing, but there's a slight chance that it can degrade, possibly even eliminate, all of their influence. So let's just see what happens. Nope, no change. He rolled better than I did. I tried broadcasting messages to the Iraqi people, but they did not want to hear it. They were not fooled. All right. Zoom back out and take a look at the war. So there are other parts of the map besides these 3: Central America, South America, and Africa, but they do not score until at least the mid-war, and what that represents is the rise of the Cuban Revolution. Gosh, I really paused there for a second. The Cuban Revolution, decolonization in Africa, the U.S. interference in elections in places like Chile, and so at the early war you don't see a lot of action happening there, but they matter and they're definitely going to come into play soon. So the U.S. now has to make a choice, and by that choice I mean Finland. So the Truman Doctrine is a powerful U.S. event if you can time it right. Remove all Soviet influence markers from one uncontrolled country. Germany's controlled, these are controlled, Yugoslavia's controlled. The only one that's not is Finland. So I guess they're losing their 1 point in Finland? Not great for me that he played that in that moment. What is he thinking? What is he thinking? Oh, thank you for the votes. 2 of you think I'm going to do well. Oh my gosh, what did he do? He tried to realign Iran right back. Now see, there's other modifiers here that are coming into play. Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, but nope. The Iraqi people, excuse me, the Iranian, were not fooled. I gotta get a coup in soon if I'm gonna have a shot at this. And the only place that has scored is Europe, but that means neither the Middle East or Asia is going to score this turn. That is good. It takes a little pressure off me to do this right now. You know what? I'm going to try something. This is a gamble. Yeah, 50% chance it doesn't work. But it does get the card out of my hand, and it's pretty much going to happen anyway, because it's too weak of a card for me to use on the space race. So we're going to let Nasser get control of Egypt, and then we're going to try and coup it away from him. Nah, it was a bad idea to start with, and it turned out just as I expected. Alright. But... and... didn't think that one through. I only used a 1 point card when I really needed to have 2. The US people might be upset with me that I am not rattling my saber enough. That's fine. I got a couple more things here to end. Let's see what happens. A couple more card plays before the turn ends. So I hope that you are all being safe and healthy in this interesting moment. Oh my gosh! A propaganda blitz convinced the people of South Africa to stop supporting the limited amount of influence I had. Oh, he's the worst. Play my action round. Well... truthfully, let's play some influence. Now that this is safe from cooing, I'm going to grab Jordan, and a Jordan bordering Israel will help in the event of the Arab-Israeli war. Let's see what he's up to next. He threw duck and cover into the space race. Not surprising, because it would have lost him the game. He failed to get an animal into space, though. That's too bad. Poor animal. I don't really want to see Arab-Israeli war go off, so I'm also going to go for the space race. I'm going to try and get my first satellite in orbit. And it's a success! Explorer 1 is in orbit! Yes! Alright, I do get a victory point for that. That can potentially offset the victory point I'm about to lose for not being enough of a warmonger for the American people. He's got one card play remaining. Let's see what he chooses. Yep, that's pretty standard. He used Fidel for the event, and now there is a Soviet-supported Cuban government off the coast. Fulgencio Batista has been forced to flee, stripping the country bare. And I mean, like, quite literally. He took, like, 2 planes worth of loot out of his palace when he fled. That guy was the worst. Alright. The Olympic Games. Now, I can't sponsor this, because if my opponent boycotts, the international situation destabilizes, and I lose the game. But I have some options. I think I want to start to make a play on Saudi Arabia. And I can get there now thanks to my influence in Jordan. Yeah, it's not great. I'm going to lose a victory point, but I can live with that. I just wasn't aggressive enough for the American people. The purge is over. The Soviets are no longer purging. I am actually staying safe. Thank you kindly for saying so. Both my wife and I are working remotely, and we've managed to avoid killing each other, which is great. She has her set up in the living room. I have the back office, aka the spare bedroom, and mostly during the day, whether I'm working on lectures or reading your discussion forums, we don't interact with each other. But once 5 o'clock hits, dinner time, and then we get caught up on all the things we missed. So, staying safe, staying sane, doing the best we can. Here we go. I like Ike. Every turn, the defense condition does improve a little bit as regime changes make people hopeful that maybe this new world going forward will be a little better. Alright, so here's the last of the events that didn't get done, but now we're reshuffling everything from the discard pile, and they're coming back. That means that... and I don't get a single scoring card! That means the Soviet player has both Middle East and Asia scoring, and potentially has Europe again. What on earth is he going to headline? Special relationship, by the way, phenomenal card if NATO is in effect, but it's not, so, just do the best I can. What is he gonna do? I think I'm gonna purge him again. Vietnam revolts. So the French have lost at Dien Bien Phu, and now, for the remainder of the turn, any cards that the Soviet player uses in Southeast Asia, +1 to its value. But they're still busy purging people who don't support Stalin, so -1 to their value. Alright. Let's see. They are opening up with NATO again! Ah! I really want that card! Woo! Alright, this time a powerful socialist communist coup has overthrown the democratically installed government in Iran. Yikes. Alright. Locks down the region and gets them all the points they need for the rest of the turn. I'm going to be hard-pressed to find 2 points from cooing somewhere in the world. Well, I know he's going to have to score the Middle East, and right now he has the advantage. He has 3 battlegrounds and 4 countries total. So I need to make the most of this. I think what I want to do is get control of another battleground, and then I don't have enough. But at least having control of another battleground gets me something. Is that the best way I can do that? What if I undo all that? That's the best part about this is, not having a human opponent sit there and be like, you can't do that. Like, let me experiment. We're doing this. Womp womp indeed, Japple. Womp womp indeed. What if I would really rather use this for its event, but what if it gets me 1 point? It's not enough to claim it. It's still not enough. That'll disrupt it, though. That would disrupt it. So it took me 2 of those points to equal him in Lebanon, and then another one to take control. So it's a 3-point card to gain 2 points, but it breaks the Soviet dominance of the Middle East. Gosh, he would still score 3 points because it's a battleground, but I can sleep with that. I can live with that. I can sleep comfortably with that. I'm going to stop talking. Let's see what he decides to do here. Oh, the Formosan Resolution. So the United States has convinced the UN to recognize Taiwan as the official government of China. And for the rest of the game, until I play the China card anyway, Taiwan is treated as a battleground country for me. And that's good. That's good. You know what? The UN card is great because both the United States and the Soviet Union had veto power in the UN. And sometimes, you just have to veto things. And I always think about how different history would be if the Soviets hadn't been boycotting the UN when the Korean War happened, because all it would have taken was a boycott. Not a boycott, a veto. And no international army to support South Korea. Huge geostrategic implications there. And in fact, there are other times when the UN tries. For example, when the Soviet Union invades Hungary after Hungary tries to withdraw from the Warsaw Pact. There's actually a UN resolution that's put together, and the Soviets kill it. I mean, just no way. And without international support, the US and other countries were not willing to unilaterally act and go in so close to the Soviets' borders. So what I'm going to do here is use this event to cancel an opponent's event, but still get the points for the cards. So I'm using it to cancel socialist governments. And what I'm going to do is continue to place influence. Let's see about grabbing up. That's still not enough. It doesn't undo the problem. What if I... shoot, I have to do it back to back. I believe I'm getting just a little bit of lag and stutter here. I'll see if I can't fix that. Alright. This isn't a great strategy, but... Oh, that's quite the question. Would you say the UN was an effective organization in the past or ineffective in general? I think that really depends on how you're measuring effectiveness. I think it represents a really fascinating set of ideas. You can definitely tell the time period in which it was written, though. There are actually some really phenomenal examples of very successful UN peacekeeping missions and other things that they have done. But there have been some real disappointments, programs that were ended too early or that support was pulled from for a whole host of reasons. And so a great example is the UN mission in Cambodia was wildly successful. That one did quite a bit of good work. Cleaning up the aftermath of the Khmer Rouge. But then you have examples such as Somalia, where after the United States elects to withdraw, the UN mission in Somalia basically falls apart. And so it really is hit or miss, and I think it depends on how you're trying to measure effectiveness. If you put me on the spot, I would say I think it has done more good than harm. I really do. But it remains to see sort of how it gets used in the future, because like any organization, individuals give up some of their sovereignty to be a part of it, and that is true for the United States or any other country. And there's some really interesting proposals on the table about how we move forward with things such as perhaps a non-permanent Security Council, because right now it's the US, China, Russia, France, and Britain that have sort of the permanent UN Security Council seats. And it's such an interesting relationship for other countries to not be a part of that. And as perhaps some of these countries' influence wane on the international stage, at what point do you finally say, okay, so-and-so, you can't be part of the Security Council anymore because you're just not a global player, right? I mean, hypothetically, in, say, 200 years, if the United States is a quarter of its size, if its economy is minor, right? At what point do you basically kick them off the Security Council, or do they just get to stay forever? And so there's lots of sort of interesting proposals coming forward about what the future of the UN might look like, which I don't know if that answers your question or just was lengthy. But there's definitely, and I mean, you talk about effective things. Look at the invasion of Korea. Right, the UN put together an international army very quickly and sent it in order to protect South Korean sovereignty, and continues to do so to this day. And that was in part because people who could block it were not in the room. It sounds dysfunctional. Superpowers can veto each other. It's that balance, and it's one of the reasons why the United States does not join the League of Nations, was that fear of losing sovereignty, right? It's Congress that decides when the United States goes to war, but if you join an international treaty that says, oh, if something happens internationally, you should do this, then you've basically taken away that power from Congress. And it was why when Wilson comes back with the League of Nations in his hand, people like Henry Cabot Lodge and Senate Republicans go, no way. How you sold it to the US in the 40s was the veto. We won't have to get involved if we don't want to. And by giving each of the 5 permanent members a veto, it was designed to create that balance, that a situation where perhaps nobody is happy, but everyone is perhaps fairly treated. It really is a fascinating organization that does have a lengthy history that's worth a good read. You could do a whole class just on it. And speaking of things that make me unhappy, what the Soviets are doing in Southeast Asia is just terrible. League of Nations is the precursor to the UN, ? Treaty of Versailles. Yes. Basically, while they're hammering out the treaty for not just Germany, right, the Treaty of Versailles, but you've got other treaties that deal with the Ottoman Empire, the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, that set of meetings goes on for 16 months. It's incredibly long, and they're there grappling with not just how this last war has ended, but what the future is going to look like. And one of the things that came out of that was this sort of international agreement to try and arbitrate disputes. And as much as people like to sort of snicker at it now because it's defunct and it didn't really work that well, the spirit behind what forms it, I think, is fascinating and is worth serious inquiry in the context, right? The world had just, and I mean the world, because World War I hits the developing world, it hits Europe, it hits the Americas harshly. And lots of people who lived through that said, oh my goodness, never again. And so it's fascinating that you have this situation where, not just a few, but dozens of countries are willing to sign over some of their sovereignty for an organization that can arbitrate rather than fight. And you have, something 80 countries that signed the Kellogg-Briand Pact, basically saying, we will no longer wage war. Which, again, people like to sort of, laugh at in their cups, but I think given the circumstances and the context of when that emerges, it's utterly fascinating and shows a lot about the mindsets that people are having in that moment. All right, so what am I supposed to be doing here? I'm loving this, by the way. Keep up the questions in chat. They're phenomenal. He's not playing for the Middle East anymore. Now he's pushing at Asia. What are we looking at in terms of countries? 4 to his 5. So if I gain another country... Aha! That changes the tables. Let's go with that. We're going to use the US-Japanese Pact to boost India and Thailand. Alright. See, we're holding steady at about 5 viewers. It's about 5 more than I expected, so that is really phenomenal. Thank you. You've all been wonderful. Let's see what's happening here. Middle East scoring. He had to do it. And why should he be hesitant about doing it? Because he does gain. The Soviet lead. I don't actually think I ever told you how you win the game. Just dawned on me. So you win the game by being the one who forces your opponent to cause a thermonuclear war. Or by... That's not correct. Oh, right, because it doesn't show it. It's a zero-sum game. So the first person to get to 20 points, and so that means 20 points more than your opponent. And right now the Soviets have 7 more than me. So what I need to do, if I wanted to win, I actually have to score 27 unopposed points, because I need to get us back to neutral and then on my side. But 7-point lead, I'm not sweating too bad yet. This is fine, particularly because in his next 2 card plays, he has to score Asia. So I'm going to press my advantage while I can and see what I can come up with here. I think I want to try and disrupt another one of his battlegrounds and see if I can't gain any. Thermonuclear war is mutual destruction, and that was part of the Cold War, was that sort of mutually assured destruction, which mutually assured destruction only works if both sides understand that that's what you're doing, which is kind of a terrifying concept, because one of the things we really learned with the declassification of former Soviet documents in the late 90s is that while the US was operating under mutually assured destruction, the Soviets were actually trying to come up with strategies to actually win a nuclear exchange. It was Nuclear Utilization TS. The acronym was NUTS. And so you had MAD versus NUTS. Not ideal. And the premise here is like, yes, whoever's causing a nuclear exchange is going to irrevocably damage the planet. But if any elements of humanity survive, they're going to forever blame the one side versus the other. And that's sort of the, so don't be the one who causes nuclear war. It is true, and it's one of those fascinating things, because all through the sort of 50s and 60s, people were constantly afraid of a nuclear exchange. And let's be clear, it's not like our nuclear arsenals have gone anywhere. It's just not a thing we really spend a lot of mental energy on as a society anymore. I didn't have to do nuclear raid drills when I was in school. Things do change. I had to do things like active shooter trainings and bomb threat trainings. And it's one of those where, Lewis Black has a phenomenal comedy routine that he does about what it was like to grow up during the Cold War and have to hide under your desk in case a nuclear bomb goes off. And it's funny to laugh at in retrospect, but that was their lived experience. The prospect of a nuclear exchange was very real. And it's one of those where I only hope that the things that sort of torment children today, like active shooters, are something that in 40 years comedians can joke about, because it is no longer a thing that plagues our society. I'm optimistic, but I'm also a historian, so I'm very pessimistic. So we'll see. Alright, so what on earth happened here? He had to play Asia scoring, and he did it before the situation could get even more out of hand. Yes, that's right, Chapel. They did have desks to protect them. As Lewis Black used to say, right? I'm hiding under wood in case I need to burn faster. Romanian abdication or special relationship? Romanian abdication or special relationship. So both the Middle East and Asia has scored, but starting next turn, Europe is back in the mix, and Africa, South America, and North America, and Central America. So I think I would like to use this. I can't coup anywhere. That's just driving me insane. I think I would like to shore up some influence in Panama and see if I can't begin to undo some of what happened. I don't like that one. I'm still going to do Panama. David Lee Roth at it. Right? Panama. Here we go. The space race with the Marshall Plan. Oh my gosh, they failed again. That's just bad luck. There's a 66% chance that the Soviets or the US can put an animal into space. And the fact that it's failed twice in a row, that's just unfortunate for the Soviets. I mean, it's great for me, don't get me wrong. That's just bad luck. I really don't want to play the China card yet. The time isn't right. I guess it's Romanian abdication. Place influence. I guess let's seize up. And now, yep, the Soviets are going to gain Romania, but that doesn't really shift the balance of power, so who cares? And, alright, here we go. Yep, I didn't rattle my saber enough. I didn't do enough things. Launch a space monkey, true hero. I mean... Alright. So, here we go. Change of plans. February 1953, Stalin goes to bed. He suffers a stroke. 5 days later, he's dead. And after a brief power struggle, Nikita Khrushchev comes onto the scene and really shakes things up. He has a very different approach to international politics than Stalin does, and it really makes for some fascinating moments. He'll actually come to the United States on a state visit. He meets John Wayne, and they swap vodka-like stories and things like that. He throws a hissy fit at a state dinner because the State Department wouldn't let him visit Disney World. He comes all this way and he just wants to go to the happiest place on earth, and both the Secret Service and the Soviet delegation tasked with protecting him is absolutely not. You cannot guarantee your safety in there. And he's kind of a melodramatic figure. But it was later at a dinner that he basically goes, "What kind of a country is this? You can't keep me safe. I come all this way. You might as well just shoot me in the head." Little melodramatic, little hyperbole. But it kind of it's a window into the mind of who he was. And also, could you imagine Stalin on a visit to the U.S. alone, never mind wanting to go see Mickey Mouse? It's a different world. So what this means for us, new cards have been added to the game. Whole new regions of the board are about to open up, and what we had been doing before, which was focusing on Europe, the Middle East, and Asia now. Alright, oh my gosh. So I know I'm going to have to score Southeast Asia. That's not so bad. I got a nice lead there. And Central America before the turn is out. Well, knowing that Central America is going to have to be a thing, I might start with Latin American death squads. All the players' coup attempts in Central and South America are going to be +1, while my opponents are -1. That can come in very handy when you're trying to gain influence points there, because basically what this represents is the U.S. is just, if I play it at least, the U.S. is just arming anti-government guerrillas or pro-government police with weapons and training, and they're just taking it out on the civilian populations. We will bury you! Famous Khrushchev diplomacy. And that degrades the DEFCON level. Alright. So, we will bury you. Unless UN intervention is played on my turn, the Soviet player is going to gain 3 VPs. I don't have it, because it is currently in the discard pile, and the Soviet player would have known that, so, he's just getting himself points. That line comes from a talk Khrushchev had done at was it the Danish embassy? Gosh, now I'm suddenly misremembering. But it was basically talking about the Soviet Union, and he declares, we will bury you. Oh my gosh. Oh, so what just happened? So much of the Cold War is fought via proxy wars around the globe, right? The US and the Soviets don't exactly exchange a lot of fire, but make no mistake, tens of millions of people will die internationally because of this ideological conflict. That was Khrushchev that visited? Yes, it was Khrushchev. Stalin did not visit. Absolutely not. But Khrushchev did come on a state visit. And actually hosted a U.S. delegation in Moscow for what we call the kitchen debates. It was none other than the Vice President, Richard Nixon, who's there. And so yeah, that was Khrushchev. What Brush War is it's a card that permits you to do basically a coup in any country on the map as long as it has a low enough stability rating, and Italy qualifies. NATO, the card that I've watched go by a couple times, prevents brush wars in Europe. But NATO hasn't triggered yet, so the North Atlantic Treaty Organization does not exist, and if Khrushchev is in power, this means this is like 1954 now. So it's only like 6 years late. And what just happened is the Soviet player did it and successfully carried out a brush war in Italy. The pro-US government has been driven out, and a communist Italian government has been installed. This is not a great start for my turn. I'm just going to update the poll real quick and take a look and see. Oh, people haven't changed their votes yet. I still appreciate the confidence, but gosh, did that hurt. Alright. Now, how to respond. If he scores Europe, he's going to get it big. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to my 1, 2, 3. So I think, you know what? This is a great time to use this, because Che Guevara can do coups against non-battleground countries in Central, South America, or Africa. There are none at present that he can target, so it's going to be a wasted event. Look at that, didn't go off. So now, let us place influence. Yeah, I know, I didn't play UN intervention. I literally can't. 1, 2. So that takes care of that, because I at least balanced the number of countries he had. But what to do now? Losing Italy like that really hurts. Where else can I place influence that would be useful for me? Oh, duh, Indonesia. I've got to score Southeast Asia. Let's get another Southeast Asian country in here. Now we're going to see what he's doing. Ooh, we're up to 6 streamers. Welcome all. Appreciate that. Feel free to say hi in chat. We've had some lovely questions so far. I apologize for all the sniffling. This cold has just been all right here. Ooh, NORAD. So NORAD is a joint U.S.-Canadian command that watches basically a series of radar stations that were scattered across the northern Canadian border called the DEW line, D-E-W. And the DEW line was responsible for making sure that if a Soviet missile was ever launched, we would have as much early warning as possible. Because the shortest distance from the Soviet Union to the United States is not east or west, it's north, over the top of the planet. So that's the direction an attack would come. And what we now know NORAD for is its Santa tracker. And every year they run this story. It's adorable, but basically a local newspaper had put in a hotline for how to call Santa, and you could talk to someone, and you'd ask if you'd been a good kid, what you wanted for Christmas. Adorable. Well, one kid, I've seen conflicting versions of this. It was either a misprint on the part of a paper, or the child just misdialed. But basically, a child ended up calling like a lieutenant colonel at the Air Force at NORAD and was asking about Santa. And much to his credit, this guy just kind of ran with it and very lightheartedly was like, oh, we'll be able to track Santa, we can let you know. And so, nowadays, everyone has their Santa trackers and things like that, but that started as a way for us to detect intercontinental ballistic missiles headed for the US. We now use it to bring joy to children as they follow Santa on his way to deliver presents. Like, that's kind of a cool little thing. And that's a great US event. And now that I control Canada, that will trigger for me every time the defense condition drops to 2. That's one of those events that really just, woof, that can add up fast. Now it's my turn to play my action round. He blunted my influence here. I don't like that. I think I want to get back control of Thailand. Yeah. And there we go. If whatever he does this turn is not too decent. As far as infrastructure and impact in Alaska, that's a really good question. I'm not exactly sure. I know it does stretch along parts of Alaska and northern, well, I should say did. I'm not much of a modern scholar. I'm a historian, but I know that it did stretch along northern Alaska and parts of Canada. It's an interesting question. I don't actually have a good answer for you. It'd be worth looking into sort of the infrastructure developments here. Let's see. What did he do? Oh, he's just being the worst, and he knows it. But I'm afraid to let up. I want to overcharge that. And now he's making a play for Japan. This guy's the worst. All right. How do I... Let's try and get out in front of him in Japan. At this point, any human player would know that I'm about to score Southeast Asia. I've clearly been committing resources to it, and so because it's a game of incomplete information, you don't know what cards your opponent has, you can still sort of deduce certain things, and he'd be after me. Oh boy, this... Perfect. Now's the time to strike. That went to France. Do not care. We're going to score Southeast Asia for its 4 points. Boom. Good. And got that out of my life. Oh, gosh, that was intense. I still have to deal with Central America. This is a great card for getting yourself started in Africa, Central America. Whoa, the Cuban Missile Crisis. He did not use it for the event, though. He used it for influence in Europe. He grabbed France, and he's making a play on Belgium, Luxembourg. All right. The Organization of American States becomes incredibly important when we get up to the 60s and the Cuban Missile Crisis. But for now, I think I want to use this to get some influence into South America. It's probably a mistake to not just play Central America scoring right now, but because I'm not realistically going to be able to outdo him. He's going to get his 1 point, whoop-de-doo. But to get 2 influence points for a 1 influence card is worth it for me. Did I watch Death of Stalin? I did not. I wanted to. I just didn't get to it. I love the people who were in it, and I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Tambor when he's not like yelling at actresses I really admire. Jason Isaacs and a lot of the people who were in it very much enjoy, and I had heard good things. I just haven't seen it yet. No. All right. So what did he do now? Oh, Algeria. Interesting. I was actually going to use puppet governments here. And as I mentioned in my one class lecture, there's always someone who is willing to be the puppet of a major power, because there's huge political and financial rewards for being so. And during the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union are both very good at finding these people. So we're going to do this for its event, and I'm going to use it to snag up some territory here. Zaire, Nigeria, and Angola. 3 battlegrounds to his 1. Boy, I'm feeling pretty ridiculous that I played Latin American Death Squads. There has not been a single coup anywhere in Central or South America. OPEC, yep. I must play Central American scoring. It is the last card of the game. He's going to get his point. And 2 more, because I didn't coup again. I never had the chance. There were no non-battleground countries that were eligible to target.
For only when our arms are sufficient beyond doubt.
Would history hold up most puppets as despots, and it went badly for those countries? Was Venezuela related to that? I can't speak to Venezuela specifically, but in a lot of ways, the first part of your question, yes. There were lots of people who were kept in power undemocratically, and look, the United States had zero qualms about stuffing ballot boxes when it came to getting people in power that we wanted. I mean, heck, when we'll talk about Vietnam for a second here, when it was time for elections between the former emperor of Vietnam before the country was divided and the guy who we had wanted to take over, No Dinh Diem, look, Diem gets 650,000 ballots in Saigon alone. There's like 500,000 registered voters in Saigon. Who supervised the elections? We did. We absolutely did. And he was kind of awful in that role. And this is true. We find people in Africa and we put them in power. We cancel elections. We come up with all sorts of pretexts. And I don't want to just pile on the U.S. because the Soviet Union is doing this too. But, at the risk of sounding like, both sidism here, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who are put in place. Heck, on September 11th, 73, we bombed the presidential palace in Chile and overturned a democratically elected government in favor of a military dictatorship. And Augusto Pinochet goes on to imprison thousands of Chilean civilians because of their suspected lack of support for his regime. He's a monster, but he was our monster, and so we keep him in power. Lower moral strategies are still strategies, it seems. Well, I mean, yeah. Yes. Oh boy, what is this hand? What is this hand? Soviet event, Soviet event, Soviet event, Soviet, 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 Soviet. Oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. All right. There's ways to salvage this. Headline, I really only have 2 U.S. options. Grain sales to the Soviets, which this did historically happen. Under Brezhnev, the Soviet Union was facing a famine, and the United States, we sold surplus grain to the Soviets. It was a huge PR win for us. So this card will take a card out of the Soviets' hands. I can play that card or give it back and then do other things with it. So we're going to headline this and see what happens. Oh, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. So I drew the Kitchen Debates, which permits me to play the event, but I can't because I don't have more battlegrounds than my opponent. So I can potentially coup first, and I think I want to do so. I'm going to try a coup in Algeria. I failed. Boy, I'm not having some luck there. So this How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This allows the Soviet player to set the defense condition to any level they want, and it counts as if they had spent 5 military ops. So they're going to get to say they went with peace, complete peace, which means they're going to coup somewhere critical on their first play. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh, we're up to 9 viewers. That's really exciting. I love it. Yep, I do not blame whoever voted for the AI because they're playing a very solid game at this point. The Ussuri River Skirmish. This was arguably the event. This refers to a situation in which the Chinese and Soviet militaries are actually shooting at each other. They had a border skirmish over the Ussuri River, and it was one of those things that sort of keyed into the United States, State Department that maybe all communism isn't necessarily Soviet-directed communism, and that maybe we could wiggle in there and be friendly with the Chinese. Because when it started, we had a very monolithic view. It begins at Moscow and it spreads outward from there. And that's just not true. Around the globe, lots of people are making decisions about whether or not their new states would be socialist or communist that had quite literally nothing to do with the Soviet Union. And it was a fascinating revelation with the declassification of Soviet documents to see how little effective control they actually had. There were constant cables between foreign offices and the Kremlin, Soviet foreign offices, basically their embassies, and the Kremlin lamenting why can't they get, Ethiopians and Somalians to do what they want, right? They're both Soviet allies. Why won't they just listen to us? The Middle East confused the heck out of them because most of these countries actually had nothing to do with communism. They didn't want it, but they were anti-Israel, and Israel was supported by the U.S., so you have strange bedfellows. And it was really a fascinating thing to see just how little control either the US or the Soviets had in this moment. But because this card is played and I already have China on my side, it gives me a great deal of political capital to spend in Asia. So I want to grab some more of Japan, and I think I want to push into Afghanistan. Boom. And now he is going to use this to coup somewhere. He'd be insane if he doesn't. Realignment rolls in Asia. Interesting. He does have a slight modifier over me, so mathematically it's worth a try. But this could blow up in his face. If the West Germans don't like the propaganda he's shilling, he could actually lose influence there. I don't know why he didn't coup. Yep. That time the West Germans started to pay attention. Propaganda caught their attention. Oh my gosh! Well, that was terrible. Ugh. Thank you, Dice. That one was horrible. So, a peaceable non-coup attempt to influence a country, and West Germany's stability rating is so high that a coup is pretty much not going to succeed anyway, but whoa, that hurts. Alright, hippies, here we go. I'm going to try and use this. I'm going to coup. If he won't, I'm going to definitely coup, and I want Italy back. Oh my gosh, and I get a 2? Well, I don't have to worry about not rattling my saber enough. But now, because of the peace, the anti-war movement, every time I play a war card, the Soviet player is going to gain victory points. So let's see here. He made this peace. So what's he going to do with it? Realigning in West Germany was pretty clever. Alright, he could have used that to overtake me on the space race. Instead, he's going to place it into... Instead, he's going to place it into Europe. Now, this affects Eastern Europe, which, so if you take a look, you can see dark purple, light purple, and some countries that straddle the divide. I am going to actually place my influence because there's nothing in Eastern Europe of mine that he can get rid of. And I want to get my lead back there. And now NATO can potentially come into play. NATO would have prevented that had it been in effect, but boy, I know the Soviet Union, the US player plays for the long term, but how would I describe China's balance as an economic and political entity during the Cold War? Boy. They're the swing vote in Asia, really. I mean, during the early days when the Sino-Soviet alliance is working, there's some cultural exchange, there's some money that changes hand, but very quickly that falls apart. Chinese communism is not Soviet communism, and the Chinese are trying to do things to improve their situation. They are coming off of, at this point, more than a century of really foreign interference in their country. First, it was European powers having basically control of the entire economy through their spheres of influence on the ports. Then you have repeated international incursions, most recently by the Japanese. The Japanese and the Chinese are fighting for more than a decade, really, before World War II ever starts, so they're trying to recover from that. Then you have the Chinese Civil War, which stops to deal with another Japanese incursion, and then resumes again after this World War II. And so, for this point, you're talking decades of economic strife and problems. So they're not flexing their muscle internationally, but they are working hard to try and repair things at home. And some of their programs just do not work well. They're interesting ideas, but they fall apart. So things like the Great Leap Forward, which was Mao's sort of baby of this international program designed to jumpstart the Chinese economy, it falls flat on its face and actually contributes to sort of countrywide famines. And the Soviets are heavily critical of it, which in turn, Mao turns around and he criticizes Khrushchev for what he sees as being soft on the US, right? You're gallivanting around California going to dinner parties. Like, don't talk to me about being soft on the US and about my bad ideas. And so that falls apart. When it comes back around and the United States starts to court, a coup in Africa produced an incredibly stable Soviet government in Zaire. When the U.S. starts to court China, which does actually culminate in state visits by the Secretary of State and the President, it provides a real jumpstart to the Chinese economy, and it's part of the reason why. I mean, the Soviet Union is not around anymore. Communist China is, because they were willing to play ball internationally with anyone who would support them. And as a result, the United States made certain concessions. We, for the first time in 20 plus years, we actually acknowledge that the country exists. Prior to that, we considered the entire country to basically be a territory in open rebellion against the legitimate government, which was located on Taiwan. We finally said, okay, right, the Chinese Civil War was a fait accompli, it's done, you are the government of mainland China, so, there you go. And it began the opportunities for international trade and now China's still here. Soviet Union is not. The Soviet Union tries some of these things very late in its life, but by that point, it's too little too late. And by the time you get the economic restructuring they need under, say, Gorbachev, things like perestroika, the ship has already hit the iceberg. It's going down. This is not something a patch job is going to fix. They should have done it 20 years earlier. And, who knows? Maybe the Soviet Union would still be around. Not advocating for that. Be very clear what I'm saying here. I'm just, by the time they put the Band-Aid on, they've lost too much blood. All right. Good Lord. That was a terrible, terrible, terrible turn. And I'm not quite sure how to follow it up. USR. Further Mustard asked, China would allow up to 50% ownership by foreigners. Is that right for companies? Truthfully, I don't know. That's a little bit more beyond my expertise. That could be true. I know land ownership and company ownership is a sticky issue. And as has been the case for lots of countries that have gone through some form of imperialist or colonial control, you're very leery of letting foreign-owned businesses dominate your economy because you lose local sovereignty. Haiti had that in their constitution after their war, in which they freed themselves from France. No foreign land ownership. And it was actually Woodrow Wilson who deployed the Marines to help us correct that clause in their constitution. Because American investors wanted in, and by law, Haitians, you couldn't own land in Haiti if you weren't a Haitian national. So that's something that does happen. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if there was restrictions on how much control foreign elements were able to have over Chinese-based companies. The Cambridge 5 is a pretty safe play, but I'm trying to think here. Central America can't score. South America won't score yet. Africa might score. And with the defense condition at a 3, you know what? I'm going to fire right back with a coup of my own and see what I can do here. Why do I even bother? Even if I roll optimally, it's not going to be great. But it'll prevent him from coupping any of my other territories, so that's the reason to do it. Yeah, that's the reason to do it. And it did knock it down quite a bit, but now the defense condition has degraded and no more coups in battleground countries anywhere. So my investments currently are safe, and NORAD has triggered. I get to place 1 influence in any U.S. country that already has one. And this is really great for pressing influence into places where your opponent does not want it. So screw it. We're just going to get control of West Germany back. It's after 11, so for those of you who've been with us for an hour and a half, I really appreciate that. Thank you for sticking in. We are continuing our stream here of Twilight Struggle. This thing started well, I think, for the U.S., but the Soviets have had some really good... the U-2 incident. Powers has been shot down over the Soviet Union. Khrushchev baited the U.S. internationally, and we fell for it. And when he asked us to apologize, Ike tells him no. So that is being used by him to get us points in Cameroon, Benelux, and Zimbabwe. So he's all over the map. But this placement right here makes me believe that he is going to try and score Asia. Decolonization would be just the kind of thing he needs. Willy Brandt. I really don't want decolonization. I'm having to really decide between terrible choices here. I might end with that just to try and get it out of my life. Alright, you know what? We're going to coup with this. See if I can't get control of Zimbabwe. Oh, very pro-US government is installed in Zimbabwe. However, West Germany is softening on the Soviets. Let's see what they decide to do. Colonial rear guards. Now that's interesting. It's basically, this is the U.S. equivalent of decolonization. As the major empires give up their territories in Africa and Southeast Asia, a number of them do try to leave behind at least friendly elements. So let's break up their control of Algeria. Let's regain some influence in there. Southeast Asia can never score again, so I think it's kind of a waste to put it there. So really, let's... Morocco is an incredibly stable country. Let's get some there. And let's just... let's overcharge one of these two. Let's go with Angola. So, alright. Now let's see what he wants to do with this. Will he coup? Will he just place influence? I don't have any scoring cards, so all of this is just academic for me. Let's see what the Soviet player decides to do. He is placing influence. He is... Yep, I opened the door to West Germany and he is jumping on it. I'm going to dump decolonization into the space race. See if I can't be the first one to get an animal into space. And I humanely send an animal to space, which is phenomenal. Going forward, I can now actually burn 2 Soviet cards for the on the space race instead of just 1. This is a good day for science. Let's see what he chooses to do. He's got 2 plays left, and only 2 cards. Interesting. Defectors, because he played it, I'll score a point, because internationally everyone is noticing all of these people trying to get from Berlin to me. He got back control of Algeria. And what else did he do? Oh, the Sudan. The Sudan, which gives him enough to break my control there. I am going to use Quagmire. So this refers to Vietnam. It definitely didn't die. This refers to Vietnam. And it can basically trap the US if you don't successfully get out of it. But it's worth it because I have to discard cards from my hand, and this could potentially get rid of some Soviet cards I don't want to deal with. So what I'm going to do is use this to place influence. There, I want to grab there, and I have to try. I have to try to stay ahead of him. But next round, I'm going to have to play a card. Oh, that's right, and it cancels NORAD. Well, there was no real way around that. No, the Voice of America is an incredibly powerful U.S. card. Oh my gosh, and he used it to blow up yet another animal. Boy, these poor Soviet dogs. We're going to use the Muslim Revolution. I invest enough resources to successfully get me out of the quagmire. Victory with peace with victory, peace with honor. Excuse me, not peace with victory, peace with honor, as Nixon would like to say. So that's great. The Vietnamese quagmire was short-lived, and it got a potentially damaging Soviet card out of my hand. Leonid Brezhnev. So Khrushchev is basically forced into retirement by hardline elements in his government, and Brezhnev takes over. And Brezhnev will, like Khrushchev, seek a different relationship with the West. He's actually becomes pretty buddy-buddy with Nixon. Ideologically, of course, they're super opposed. But personally, they get along, and that matters. When world leaders can have that sort of personal relationship, interesting things can happen. And so with Brezhnev and Nixon, it happens. It happens with Gorbachev and Reagan. Perhaps diametrically opposed politically, but when personal things happen, when individual leaders like each other personally, all sorts of neat stuff is possible. Alright, so here we go. Now we've got some cards. Arman in Tehran, that's the Shah for the US. Nixon plays the China card. I've already got it. It would get me some victory points. The Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. This is a great one to save in order to pull off a surprise coup mid-turn. Camp David Accords, probably next to negotiating the release of our hostages from Iran. Carter's greatest accomplishment. And this is another one of those where I think people like to sort of snicker at it because obviously long-term peace in the Middle East has not been achieved. But what it took to actually get Israel and Egypt sitting down at a table together was phenomenal. That took enormous political energy, and really Sadat of Egypt deserves a good amount of the credit for being one of the people who opens that door by saying, you know what, like, we can't do another war with Israel. It's just, this is killing Egyptians, this is ruining our economy. So this is a great one for the US player to use. Junta, I can attempt to get control in Central South America, and Duck and Cover, which degrades the DEFCON. Now that is a dangerous card for me to play right now, because if the Soviet one also degrades it, one of us is going to lose straight up. And the only way to control who goes first is whose card is higher. So I'm going to use our man in Tehran. The Shah is going to give me insider information about what's going on in the Middle East, and then I'm going to get rid of a whole bunch of Soviet cards, ideally without triggering their events. Ooh, de-Stalinization. So he's going to relocate a bunch of Soviet influence around the globe. I'll be curious to see where he puts it. So de-Stalinization refers to the process that Khrushchev begins of basically, after Stalin dies, smashing his cult of personality, just really taking it apart. Oh, and the things that I draw are all US-backed events, or neutral events. So, didn't have to worry about any Soviet events. That actually didn't work out quite the way I had hoped. Still got a 2-1 lead in the poll for who's going to win. Right now, I think it's actually a coin flip. This is a nice, cozy position for the Soviets to be in on turn 6, but most of their better cards are behind them. So Cultural Revolution, I might use that just because I can get the card right back. I mean, with Nixon literally playing the China card. So let's take a look at my options here. I mean, yeah, I have to commit my decision for the non-decision I did. Question from Feather Mustard: was removing Stalin's personality cult different than treating Lenin's legacy? Absolutely. Lenin was revered and still is in many ways for the work he did. Stalin very much cast himself, oh my gosh, as the next Lenin. And when he's killed, well, when he dies, there's speculation that he was actually poisoned, but because of a bungled autopsy, we can't ever really know. But he was also an old man, and he had a stroke in his sleep, so it's entirely possible that that's just what happened. His body's laid to rest by Lenin's, and Khrushchev comes into power and goes, absolutely not, and has it moved. That is a telling sign. We also begin the process of renaming certain cities, of loosening sort of academic restrictions, and so Soviet professors are able to research and talk a little more openly about the Soviet Union's past, and really starting to get people away from the fact that, like, you know, look, yes, he led our country through a terrible moment. You know, World War II was horrible. The Soviets lose 1/6 of their population, which, holy cow. But he also does a lot that is quite tyrannical and ends up doing a lot of harm to the Soviet people. And Khrushchev says we need to be willing to talk about that and acknowledge that. He is not someone to be put on a pedestal. Like, take down his statues, take down the school buildings and things named for him. So my action round, he did a coup in Africa that hurt. I can't coup a battleground country back because I will be in serious trouble. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to my 1, 2, 3. Oh gosh, no, he's got even more than that. Alright. So what I'm looking for now is actually the great time for a play like this. Improves the defense condition. And then we coup. Oh, and it's so good! Zaire has returned to the fold, and Africa has been stabilized. It's so, so good. Ah, cursed head cold. I'm glad it's finally gone, but my voice is not quite yet fully recovered. Alright, he's expanding into South America, Venezuela, Ethiopia. I need to score Europe at some point and just... Oh my gosh, he's got 8 points there? This is going to cost me the game. We're going to use the Cultural Revolution card because I can get the China card right back. Alright. Alright, that's a start. And let's get ourselves another country in Europe to start balancing it out, because just woof. Let's see what he's going to do. I mean, he has to be trying to score Africa, right? Middle East and Asia can't score. Central America can't score. South America could score, though. Ooh, the Brezhnev Doctrine. That's the equivalent of their... that's the Soviet equivalent of containment for our purposes. We're going to create a pro-US junta. Now, I'm pretty sure... Yep, that's what I thought. So what we're going to do is, we're still going to do the junta, but instead we are going to coup in Colombia. And a very powerful pro-US Colombian government has been installed. That's good. That is good. And from there we can work on these other two. Oh my gosh. I can't tell if it's the lamps I have or if it's just the fact that this is not going super well for me, but I am sweating. Is anyone else sweating? Anyone at home? He's chaining from Brazil down to Uruguay. He's headed for Argentina. Now I have Salvador Allende, who is the guy I actually referenced earlier, who was elected in Chile and is then driven out of power because he had policies and programs that the US did not like. Alright, we're going to place some influence here, and yep, lock up Brazil, and I think I'm going to try and get at this the other way. Go through Ecuador and start putting pressure on Peru and Bolivia. I probably should have put that in Morocco. You do what you do. Alright. I was hoping to play the Nixon card before that happened. That's just a lot of influence that he threw onto the world stage. He's making a play for Portugal, and he snagged Argentina. I have got to try and stay in front here. I think I'm going to try and disrupt Italy. Alright, 6 is better than 8. Good heavens. 6 is better than 8. Oh my gosh, I'm holding the European scoring card. I should have been playing those extra points there. Who cares if he scores South America? If I lose Europe, I've basically lost the game. Are there more Cuban-specific events? Well, there is Fidel, and then there is the Cuban Missile Crisis, which simulates the situation that happens. Oh. He attempted a coup in Zimbabwe that barely succeeded. I still have good control there. So yes, there is the All right, card plays left. There is the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is really the turning point in many ways for the Cold War. It will never be the same afterwards. That doesn't actually do... Nah, I don't like that. Let me try this instead. I need to break up something else of them. That lowers it another point. 5 is much better than 8. Ask not what your country can do for you. The U.S. player may discard up to their entire hand, including scoring cards, and draw replacements from the deck. We're going to ditch that, because that was only going to benefit them. And I'm going to ditch this, because that's going to benefit them. Now, I could draw cards that are going to be very good for the Soviets. This is a gamble. Oh, Ninaj XX is here. Welcome to the stream. Of course I drew 2 Soviet defense. I drew 2 Soviet events. Lone gunman, the U.S. player reveals his hand, and then the Soviets conduct operations as if they had played a card. I cannot play this right now, because if I do, the Soviets are going to simply do a coup in a battleground country, and the game will be over, because I'm the one who played the card. So instead, I guess Charles de Gaulle is going to lead France. Remove 2 U.S. influence from France and add 1 Soviet influence, and it cancels NATO. I mean, that doesn't really change the situation at all. I could just put it to the space race. Let's put it to the space race. It's a success! Yuri Gagarin is not the first man to orbit. He's not the first man, in space. It's gonna be an American instead. Oh, that was desperately needed. That was desperately needed to bring that score down. Oh, Tricky Dick.
The people of the world want peace.
Here he is.
And the leaders of the world are
so this is a 10-turn game, max. And we're on to turn 7. So for those of you who've stuck with me for the past 2 hours, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here with us and checking this out for my inaugural stream. So it's lovely to see the support. Alright, so we've got some reshuffling going on, and I still don't have any scoring cards. Oh my gosh. Nixon plays the China card again. Test ban handed back and said, oh, the John Paul elected Pope. This is a great one for getting the Soviets out of Poland. Now, what do I want to headline? Just like the United States gets trapped in Vietnam, and I mean, we are there a long time, the Soviet Union will be involved in Afghanistan for the good part of a decade. I am going to trap the bear in Afghanistan. Oh my gosh, they headlined a scoring card? That's such a risky play. If I had had anything that could have put influence points on the board, I would have been able to clean up right there. That's such a risky play by the Soviet player. But now they are in the bear trap, and they're going to have to discard at least a 2-ops card in order to try and satisfy this. And if they roll like they've been rolling on their space race, they could be stuck here for a while. Have I ever heard of the stats that a large number of Vietnam-based American troops shot to miss or did not shoot their weapons, something like half the soldiers? Any truth to that? I'm not familiar with anything like that, but to be fair, I am not a Vietnam expert. I teach it as part of sort of the global 20th century and as part of sort of general U.S. history, but I am not a Vietnamese specialist, so I don't know. I've not heard that before, but that doesn't mean it's not true. I'd be curious to know more about that claim. U.S. involvement in Vietnam is incredibly complicated. There are some really unsavory things that we do while we are there. But I'd be curious to know more about that. That's not something that I'm familiar with. So the Soviets failed to escape the bear trap, which means I get to take my turn, and the next turn they're going to have to discard another card again. This is a great moment for me to potentially turn the tide here in some key areas. can't decide if I want to try and shore up Asia, which does need to score, Africa, which is going to score at some point, or finish locking up Central America. Too much to do. Too much to do. Boom. Let's get Central America on lockdown for now. And now he has to play another card to try and escape the bear trap. And it failed again. This is where it turns. This is where it turns, right here. The Soviet... Oh my gosh, 2-2. I only have a 50% chance of winning, according to chat. Y'all are brutal. Thank you for doing the quiz. I only just today figured out how to add things like that to my Twitch page. So, yay, I'm glad it works and that you can find it. Holy cow, they failed! The Soviet Union is bogged down fighting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and we are supplying them weapons 100%. Like, that is a huge part of Reagan's foreign policy, is pumping money into the Mujahideen. I'm actually so giddy I have no idea what to do. I'm gonna pump a card into the space race because I have a 66% chance. Oh, it failed. I tried to have a man orbit the Earth. It didn't work. Alright. Alright. Soviets are still stuck in the bear trap. They're just wasting cards and not able to do anything. Let's see what they do next. South African on rest, but they successfully got out, so they will get to have a normal card play on their next turn. But holy cow. What was that? That was like... Yeah, that was 3 cards in a row for them that they lost out on. That's huge. So Africa's going to potentially score. Europe is... oh shoot, Europe is back in play. And South America could potentially score. Where do I go next? Where do I go next? It might be time for a Chinese coup. I know. If I work with the Chinese communists, I'm turning my back on Taiwan. Powerful new Nigerian state is in charge. Alright. The score still doesn't look pretty, but I'm breathing a lot better. This is... I'm in the lead, neutral. Only one place is the Soviets have any real advantage. Oddly enough, it's Europe, but I'm feeling a lot better here. 1 point coup card against where? They're continuing to chip away at Zimbabwe. They said something about that there. I can play 2 cards in the space race. Let's just get rid of this one. That one succeeds. From now on, the Soviet player must show me their headline card before I choose mine. That is enormous. Boy, the space race is not going at all the way it did historically. I am just way ahead of the Soviets here. Historically, the Soviets ticked off a lot of these accomplishments first. First man in orbit. They had the first woman. They had a lunar orbiter that returned pictures of the moon. We have the coveted one. We landed on the moon. But prior to that, the Soviet was really ticking off a lot of those boxes. U.S. coup attempts in battleground countries do not trigger the DEFCON track because I'm using nuclear subs to smuggle people into critical areas. This is huge. This is huge, and it might be time for some battleground cooing because they can't coup back. Boy, where is Latin American Death Squads when I need it? I still don't like that Europe is so powerful. Let's get the Soviets partially out of Poland. Pope John Paul is elected Pope, and he was Polish. And this is going to lay the groundwork for some important political realigning on the global scale for Poland. It opens the door for Lech Wales's solidarity movement. I scored Africa. He must have not been able to hold it anymore. He might only have scoring cards left. The question is where. If it's Central America, I'm fine. If it's Asia, I'm fine. So I think I make a play for South America. Ah, that's right. If I play that card, let's undo that. I can use literally any other 2-point card. One or two, nothing happens. Am I better off just placing? I might be. What happens if something like this goes on? Not particularly exciting. Right now they actually gain the lead, so that's a guaranteed point. But the fun way would be... You know what? Let's roll those dice. We're going to do the coup. A Venezuelan coup. It's super successful. No one has control there now. So, yeah, and he did South American scoring, which is a blank. Nobody gets it. And for my last card... So Central American scoring is still going to be a thing. Europe still is not looking pretty. Asia will score, and the game is won and lost in Asia in a lot of ways. That's right, I keep getting that. You know what? I'm going to take the China card back. There we go. The Soviets did not rattle their saber enough! Oh, the tide has turned. It really has. The tide is turning.
But surely one such lesson, learned by the world at great cost.
So we're up to the late war now. We are up to the late war.
Becomes a contagious disease.
So we've got a whole new set of cards. These are often incredibly pro-US. If the Soviet player hasn't won by now, it's not likely that they are going to. And because I have a man in orbit, I get to sort of peek at what the Soviet player is going to do first. So let's see what Comrade Questions picks here. Ooh, some late war cards. The Iran-Contra scandal, big scandal for the Reagan administration. Latin American debt crisis. The Iranian hostage crisis. Man. Sadat expels... He's choosing a U.S. event as his headline card? He must be in rough shape. Well, I'm not going to cancel it with defectors, that's for sure.
Today I say, as long as this gate is closed, as long as this star
Man, I actually don't have a great option here. And I actually don't know... Alright, 1, 2, 2. I have one advantage. Still +1. +2. Back to even. Nope, kitchen debates doesn't look like it's working out for me. We'll just do the Marshall Plan. Play 7 influence. Let's get here. Let's grab one there. One to Austria. Let's overcharge Greece and Turkey a little bit. Oop, a little bit of lag on my end. Hopefully that cleans up. Let's go ahead and show the Nordic countries some love. They've been ignored this whole time. And just like that, Sadat has kicked the Soviets out. And it's not a super US government, but it is slightly. So let's see what he does. Let's see what he does. This is where it's going to be decided in the next couple turns. Yes! NATO goes into effect because the Marshall Plan was played. Ah, finally. And, I mean, Warsaw Pact too, but still. And a powerful Soviet coup overthrows Mexico's government and puts in place the Soviet one. That's great. We're off to a real start. Ah, I could have played Kitchen Debates. This is one that just, who cares? Remove all U.S. influence in Iran. There is none. That's a pretty safe play. Alright. And then the Portuguese Empire crumbles, huh? Central America still has to score. So him doing that is not great. Europe still has to score. I know this could make the terrorism card more powerful against me. The Iranian hostage crisis, referring to when a group of students charged into the U.S. embassy in Iran. They took the embassy staff hostage and they held them for 173 days, I believe. It's the thing of Carter's presidency. He tried to get them back in a military operation. It does not work, and he ultimately negotiates for their release. But by that point, I mean, politically, people had sort of washed their hands. They were like, "No, we're done. We don't like the way you handled this." And as a result, he loses to Reagan in when we get to 80. All right. Also, this card, functionally useless because I don't do a lot of realignment rolls. But what I will do is a coup. And switch Nicaragua over to a pro-US government. I guess the Contras managed to get the job done. He's using the Cuban Missile Crisis as a coup. He's going right back. Yep. And we could unfortunately ping pong like this all along because so I have to find a better alternative. I know this is just going to give him points, but it's better to get. And now I have secured Poland for the US, and that is, yeah, that's a couple nice victory points there. So he'll still score more than me, but it won't be that debilitating if he does. Though he's probably going to score Central America next, which just, ugh. He really could triple his score in the next, like, 2 card plays if he has them. Oh, the Iran-Iraq War. He's playing it as the event. Historically, yes, Iran-Iraq did fight a lengthy war. Iraq, amazingly enough, managed to get support from both the U.S. and the Soviets. And normally this would have replaced influence, but he had none to replace. So his objective here was to just get the 2 VPs and the 2 things. Am I giving up on Europe? I wouldn't say I'm giving up on Europe, but I got to be smart about how I use my remaining points. And I think I have a chance at... nope, that's a 3-point card. Don't have enough for that. I need to find a better option here. There's double US, 2 countries in South America. I'm okay with that because South America has already scored for now, so I'll deal with that another day. For right now, it's all about keeping Central America from overscoring. He gets to pick 2 countries and have his influence doubled. Wouldn't be surprised if it's Brazil and Venezuela. That would largely break the back of my battleground countries there. Did I see that right? He chose Chile and Argentina, so he doubled up something he already had, and he added another point to a country I had no way of affecting. Sure. Alright, what's he doing? Alliance for Progress. Gets me 2 victory points for the battlegrounds I control in country. And then, oh my gosh, Haiti. Yeah, another country here. And where did he go with that other one? I missed it. 2 to Czechoslovakia. He's continuing to grab territory here, although I'm more interested in the battleground countries. So, two to Southeast African states and Angola. The kitchen debates, when Khrushchev and Nixon walked through a model home of a United States house showing all the modern amenities that they had, and they had a very spirited but intense debate about which side was better, capitalism and communism. Look, Khrushchev wasn't an easy man to deal with, but like literally at one point Nixon reaches out and pokes at him. And if I can give you one piece of advice, as someone who's spent more than a decade in higher ed studying the past, is that don't touch foreign heads of state, like ever. Just don't do it. It's not great. Don't touch foreign heads of state. But here in this case, the U.S. controls more battlegrounds. I poke my opponent in the chest, and I gain victory points. Boom. Let's see. Has anyone new weighed in on the poll? Nope, still 2-2. 50-50. I won't lie, I'm not sure whether I'm going to win or not either. Oh, this is one of those events that becomes amazing if NATO is in a play. Because otherwise you add 1 influence. Now I get to add 2 and gain 2 VP. And we're going to use that to break up Soviet control of France and get a couple more victory points. This turn is going great. Oh, this is just delightful. I'm definitely going to save defectors for next turn if I can, because I don't want that going off. I might not have a choice, though, because if I play Lone Gunman, I'm going to lose. Stop doing that in Central America! Alright, where did he put these? 1 to Sweden, 1 to the Dominican Republic. So by breaking up France like that, actually Europe, I'm not really afraid of it anymore. That's great. Yeah, unless I'm going to have to use the China card if I want to save defectors. But I think I'm okay with that. What I'd like to do is a coup. Get another very positive pro-US government set up in the Central America. That's great. Unfortunately, the Portuguese Empire comes apart, and that does affect my control. And I did it right in the nick of time! That was supposed to be so much more devastating. I mean, he still gained 3 out of it, but it could have been more. Oh, isn't that great? And now, we are going to use the China card for maximum effort. It's just a question of where. It is just a question of where. I think I want to get those in Afghanistan, finish having control of Japan. Oh yeah, this is going to be so good when this finally scores. I have no idea where the Asia card is. And let's just break up North Korea's control a little bit. Alright, we both rattled our sabers enough. Nobody lost anything. Oh my gosh, I won. The game was ended by held scoring cards. So that is one of the things you're not permitted to do. You are not permitted to hold a scoring card that you need to play. I have no idea what scoring card he held. I don't think it'll show me. That's so unsatisfying. I wanted the win to come from my brilliant strategy, not whatever that was. It clearly must have just been he tried for too long to get control of key areas and he failed. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the Asia card, because woof, that would have swung it, and then going forward he was in rough shape. And that's one of the beautiful things about this being an asymmetrical game, is both sides have their strengths at key moments. The Soviets can get off to an early lead, and if they do so, well, it's done. The game can be over by turn 3, 4. If the US player is able to stay the course, the game turns for them. And that's meant to represent the souring of relations between the Soviet Union and the rest of the Warsaw Pact as you get later into the game. I mean, if you remember the card, I'm curious if it's in the discard, I can show it to you. Eastern European unrest. No, it's not in there. Eastern European unrest is twice as effective in the late war as it is during the rest of the game. And it's because Poland becomes problematic. Czechoslovakia, Hungary, they just all start to say, to hell with the Soviet Union. And what makes it better in many ways is that Gorbachev lets them go, right? Previous premiers, including Khrushchev and Brezhnev, crack down hard on Eastern Europe when they clamor for reform and rights, and Gorbachev decides to do it this sort of the Frank Sinatra way. He goes, right, do it your way. We hope you still choose socialism and communism, but do it your own way. But by that point, public opinion is fed up. A lot of the old guard who still supported the Soviet Union in country were seen as outdated, and young people were voting in new reformist governments. And that's meant to reflect that. So yes, the tide had definitely turned. I'm just sad I didn't get to show you that win that way, but I am glad I won, because holy cow, it did not look like it was going to go that way for a while. And somebody got in at the last second with a safety vote, 3-2. Thank you for the vote of confidence. I did not think that was going to play out the way it did. But that is Twilight Struggle, and against two players of comparable skill, it really will tend to come down to that. There's one card in the late game that can end the game, and if the Soviets have retained their lead, they can win. If the US has successfully turned it around and has their own lead, they can win. But very rarely does it actually get to the full 10 turns. But that went much longer than I thought it would. I appreciate everyone who stuck with it and stayed with me for the ride. So that has been Twilight Struggle. If you didn't get a chance to see the whole thing, or you missed some of it earlier, this will be available on my Twitch page, so you can go back and watch the broadcast earlier. And ideally, I'd like to do a lot more of these. There's some really phenomenal historical ports of some great games. I mean, we have this one, Fort Sumter, which is another GMT game that simulates the secession crisis. Did I get that right? Crisis, good heavens. And it's going to be of interest to my students in my Civil War memory class. I'd like to probably do that sometime in the near future, and then go from there, because there really are some phenomenal historically based games out there that are both fun to play, but also offer some really interesting entry points for talking about the past, and what's more fun than that? So thank you all so much. My name's John Riley. I really appreciate you for staying with us, and I hope you had a good time. Have a good night, and go read.